on in Bernie Sanders' presidential run, he was very clear about the fact that he had no interest in attacking frontrunner Hillary Clinton. Well, it seems that as the primaries go on, Bernie Sanders has changed his messaging a little bit, if you ask me. He's become a little more aggressive in attacking Hillary when it comes to the substance, not when it comes to nonsense. Now, there are 3 clips that we're going to show you that kind of demonstrate exactly what I'm talking about. Let's take a look at the first clip.
Kids 17 to 20 graduated high school who are white, 33%, unemployed, Latino, 36%, African American, 51%. So I've got a radical idea. Instead of locking up our kids, let's invest in jobs and education. Instead of having more people in jail than any other country, let's have the best educated population on earth.
Okay, can I just jump in there for a second, Anna? So that one is much more subtle. The other 2 will be far more clear. Now, it's part of the boilerplate of what Bernie Sanders does talking about criminal justice reform. But the subtle digs at Hillary Clinton there is, she's got a record on mass incarceration that is not very good. And a lot of African-American critics of Hillary Clinton have been talking about that recently. So it's partly how he brings that up and saying, hey, you know what, maybe instead of locking them up, we should have education as well. Second, very, very subtle dig is that Hillary Clinton has some private prisons that are donating to her campaign. So he said, do you really want somebody that has been part of this system doing all those things? Now, if you're not knee deep in politics, you probably missed those 2 issues in regards to this, but you probably like that statement anyway.
Right.
It resonates with everybody. That's part of why he's been saying it for a long time. It's
interesting because I commend Bernie Sanders for wanting to run a clean race and a clean campaign that doesn't attack Hillary Clinton needlessly, that doesn't, hit below the belt. I think that that's actually an admirable part of his campaign. But at the same time, I want him to be more aggressive and a little more concise and clear when it comes to his messaging on how different he is from Hillary Clinton, right? Because I feel like Hillary Clinton's messaging has been clear, and she's very, very successful in putting misinformation out there that goes unchallenged by the media. So an example of that is this whole notion of Bernie Sanders wanting to repeal the Affordable Care Act. He has no interest in repealing the Affordable Care Act, and unfortunately the media will not question her or challenge her when she spreads that lie, right? Mm-hmm. And so in order for him to mitigate the damage that's being caused not only by the Hillary campaign, but by the press not doing its job, he needs to be more aggressive in his messaging.
Yeah, I wouldn't have any problem bringing up that she's taking money from those groups. I wouldn't have any problem bringing up her past record. That's what primaries are for. Let's hash it out. These are not personal attacks. These are attacks about her record and the people she's taking money from. Okay, now he is going to get more aggressive on the other counts. He's not going full Cenk here. I don't think that's flattering to me, but but at least he is finally going a little bit more aggressive and not just, here's my policy positions, you like, you don't like, you don't like.
Exactly. So in the next clip, he talks about Goldman Sachs and the influence Goldman Sachs has on certain politicians, including Hillary Clinton. Take a look.
Every politician in the history of the world, Republican, Democrat, whatever, has always said, oh, yes, I'm getting millions and millions of dollars from powerful special interests, from the drug companies, from the fossil fuel industry, from Wall Street. But it doesn't impact me. They're just throwing that money around for the fun of it. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. And in addition, Secretary Clinton has received hundreds of thousands of dollars for speeches, a speech, several speeches, each for $200,000, that she gave to groups like Goldman Sachs. Now, if you get paid $225,000 for one speech, it must have been a fantastic speech. So I think that Secretary Clinton should share that fantastic speech with the whole country.
That was wonderfully sarcastic.
It was so good. It was so good. And look, before we get to the substance, I just can't get over how real Bernie Sanders is in terms of his body language, right?
Yes.
Like, there's no this when he's talking, but there's a lot of this, right? There's a lot of like, let me tell you what's really going on. And you can tell he's speaking off the cuff. You can tell it's genuine and sincere. I think that goes a long way with young voters especially. So I love seeing that.
Yeah, all the politicians are taught, hey, don't point your finger because that looks accusatory and it's too aggressive. Don't do this, don't do that. That's why they do this thing that no human being actually does. You've never seen anyone who does this unless they were taught to do it by a consultant.
That actually seems more authoritative, if you ask me. Like, if someone's talking to me by doing that hand gesture, I get a little...
What is this hand gesture?
I don't
it does not
know.
exist among Homo sapiens, okay? It only exists among robots, either corporate robots or political robots. Anyway, you can tell that's why they're like, Washington is flummoxed. Like, why is Bernie Sanders popular with the young? Because it's obvious he's not coached, he's authentic. Nobody talks like this and is slouched over as a politician because their consultant told him, right? Obviously he didn't, he's genuine. But look, these attacks now, they've got to be even more aggressive. And I know that Bernie's such a nice guy, he has trouble doing it, and that's part of his appeal, and I don't want to take that away from him. But it's about time. Yes, she got paid $225,000 for every speech she gave at Goldman Sachs. She gave 3 of those. She made $11 million, not campaign money, into her own pocket from all the speeches she gave after she left the State Department. Should you call that out? Of course you should call that out. And, you know, so now he's being, before he'd be like, hey, look, these things influence you. That's why I want to get money out of politics. Now he's saying, people who telling you I took all this money and it didn't influence me, come on. Come on. Who believes that?
Yeah. Again, I love that he's getting a little more aggressive. I don't think that he's aggressive enough to mitigate the damage that's being done to his campaign by both Hillary's campaign and the press unchallenging her, you know, untruths. Okay, so the last one is my favorite because it has to do with foreign policy. Now, Bernie Sanders is not the strongest on foreign policy. We've been very honest about that. However, there's this notion that Hillary Clinton is much better at foreign policy or making foreign policy decisions because she's more experienced. But that's not necessarily true given her record, and he calls her out on that. Take a look.
And there is another area where we have strong disagreements, and that is the most important foreign policy debate to have taken place in this country in the last 20 years obviously had to do with Iraq. Now, I listened as a member of the House, Vermont's representative to the House, very closely to what President Bush and Vice President Cheney and all the others were saying about the need to invade Iraq. I listened closely and I concluded that they were not telling the truth. Not only did I vote against the war, I helped lead the opposition against the war. Secretary Clinton heard the same information that I did. She voted for the war.
So, first of all, you guys should check out TYT Politics. There's a lot more of these clips. Jordan and Eric are on the road. There are field correspondents covering the campaign, doing an amazing job getting this footage and so many more interviews. That's youtube.com/TYT Politics. This is shot by them. And so on this ground, all this talk of experience, again, Anna's right. The media doesn't call it out. Okay, you have all this experience. To what end? And that experience led you to make what decisions? Oh, right, the wrong decisions. Now, people pretend Bernie Sanders doesn't have experience. The guy's been doing this for 40 years. So it's not, what do you mean he doesn't have experience? Yes, he was not Secretary of State. Well, I'm never been Secretary of State, but I know foreign policy really well, right? It doesn't mean like if you're not Secretary of State, oh, what's foreign policy? Never heard of it. Bernie's been in Congress for all this time and been making the right decisions instead of the wrong decisions. That would lead me to believe he's got better experience.
Yeah, so to add to that, I think look, I don't think that Bernie Sanders is necessarily worse in foreign policy. I think that he's actually better in foreign policy when you actually read what his policies are, right, or what he would do. What hurts him is during the debates, for some reason, whenever questions of foreign policy come up, he gets a little stumped, right? And he knows his stuff. Like, you read his policies, it's very perfectly outlined what he would do in the Middle East, right? Or what he wouldn't do in the Middle East, which is, in my opinion, more important. But the questions come up, and he's not as confident as Hillary is when answering those questions. So I think that hurts him. But all you need to do is look into what he wouldn't do and how he wouldn't be influenced by certain forces that influence political decisions when it comes to foreign policy. He's not going to allow weapons manufacturers or the military-industrial complex to influence his decision-making when it comes to the Middle East. And I think that's the most important thing.
Even when I see their pictures, Hillary Clinton looks like she's from the Empire. And Bernie Sanders, he looks like he's definitely from rebel headquarters.
I actually was shocked to find out what his net worth is. I thought that he was like any other politician. He's got millions of dollars, right? Of course, he's a politician. He's been a politician all his life. And then you find out that he has maybe $500,000 max. That's insane.
Okay, to give you a sense, like you might think, wait, $500,000 is a lot.
It is a lot, but not for a politician.
No. The Clintons have over $100 million. Okay, and they never ran a business. It's not like they came from running a business or this or that. No, they made that because of politics. Speeches and books that they wrote, all related to politics, they made $100 million. That's a nice industry, right? From being in power that long. So now, by the way, the other day, Hillary Clinton's campaign unleashed a new attack on Bernie Sanders, saying, how can he handle finance for America? He still owes $65,000 on a credit card. I'm like, I don't know if you know this, but you're actually helping him, right? Because a lot of people go, hey, I owe a lot of money on a credit card too. And this guy's not one of those millionaires and billionaires like almost everyone else in Congress.
Yes.
And so he had 40 years to make a killing. He chose not to, right? That's why that line about those fantastic speeches at Goldman Sachs was so great. Man, they paid you a lot of money for those speeches. They must be awfully good, right? Of course they're paying you the money to influence you, not because you gave a great speech. If it was so great, share it with everybody. Past time that Bernie Sanders said that. And finally, he mentioned there in that same speech, hey, listen, if you go for a whole loaf, maybe in a worst case scenario, you get half a loaf. If you go for half a loaf from the beginning, all you get is crumbs. Damn.
Yes.
Okay, give me more of that.
He says Americans deserve a whole loaf, and I love that.
You know what we need? We need a whole loaf of aggressive progressive from Bernie Sanders. We're just getting started.